I took everything off of the generator, like the tank and the guard and all that stuff. So we have a little bit more working room here. I just kind of wanted to go over a couple things. One, I noticed that's a new carb. Looks a little importy. This spring seems like it could be doing a little better. I guess it's not horrible. There's also this spring. I feel like there should be another one somewhere. I thought there was. I could be wrong though. That's probably wrong. I could be thinking of the different style of Briggs. But in the mail, about 2 days ago, I got this. Probably need to see it. So this part right about here snapped off from the looks of it, and maybe a little higher. So we need to install this, except right there. It's a bug. And that's not going to be the easy part. So in the minimum we're going to have to do now, so I'm going to have to take off all the mounting points, which there should be 4. I think 2 for the engine, and yeah, okay, so 4. It's pretty dirty, so it gives us an opportunity to clean this up a little bit. I've already disconnected the panel. It just clipped on pretty easy. That was nice. Putting this all in the little corner so I could put it easily back together. Because these are not something I work on routinely, I'm putting the screws back where they came from just so I can keep track of them. For instance, the screws to put the panel on are right here, and they're just self-tapping screws, so I just put them back in. So we're going to have to take off these after we remove it from the case, and after the case I may move or remove this, like the carburetor. I'll probably remove the carburetor, definitely this plastic bit, and that way I just don't want anything to break. Maybe this linkage contraption, and the motor should be more or less free. Well, not free, but I'd be surprised if anything broke on it. So once we do that, take off these 4. There's 2 on the top and 4 on the, or 2 on the bottom. At that point, I do believe this is a tapered shaft. Yeah, it's a tapered shaft. I'm 99% sure of that. I've never worked on a generator that wasn't a tapered shaft, that wasn't like made in the 60s. So I could be wrong though. I do know they exist. I just don't think that I have the luck that comes with having one that, you know, is on my table. So tapered shaft. Now you could be a barbarian and just beat it off, but the chances of you damaging everything is pretty much a given. So then you end up having to do some pretty interesting kind of ways to kind of force it off. I looked up one a long time ago where you use oil or water, and you kind of fill the gap in between where, was it the rotor? No, not rotor. I'll put it on the description. But you fill like the gap, and then you put a bolt in on top. I'm going to show everything, and this is like a brief little description in case I forget to explain what I'm doing later. And then that presses down on the tapered shaft, and then that will kind of remove it because it's just pressed on. Put enough pressure on it, it will come off. So we're going to hopefully do that. So I'm not going to do this tonight. We're going to do this tomorrow. But for you, it's not going to matter. Took the end off. Everything seems to be fine. But I don't really have any suspicion of lack of power. Yeah. Should be okay. So I'm going to take off this. I'm not quite sure how yet. I'm going to look it up on the internet and see if I can find a diagram. But we'll take it off. Looks like it just slides off. Somewhat. Oh, I see. I need to take the mounts off. I didn't do that one quite yet, so I'm going to go ahead and take the mount off. This rod came out. Unfortunately, this is what's holding everything in place, but it's also pressed fit. So what I need to do is I'm going to tap in here, and then I'm going to cut to length a different rod that's a little bit shorter than this, and just crank it down, and hopefully that'll put enough pressure to just pop this loose. Finally got it off. So this fits over the tapered shaft like so. I ended up having to put oil in there instead of the rod. The rod is actually bending. Just fill it up till you have about 3 threads before the oil starts overflowing. Put a generous amount of Teflon on a bolt and just crank it down, and it will literally pop off. So I'm going to take the oil out of the engine and take off the side cover, and then we will place the governor on. Got the side off, remove the screws, take off this plate. So now I'm just going to take off the side cover. I hope I don't need to buy a new gasket, but if I do, I do. So I'm just going to remove that. That can be a little tricky, so I'll bring it back once I'm done. And we have it. So I'm going to take it off real quick. Let's give this a left tap. Maybe with a pick. Nah. Now I need to move that rod. Okay, so I got the old one out, put the old new one in. Seems to be pretty decent. I'm probably going to put a little oil on it just to make sure it gets well lubricated. But other than that, it should be fine. I'm going to put this side cover on. I did order a new gasket, and then we will put the generator back together and we'll see if it runs. I don't know if it's just escaping me the reason why, but so I put the clip back on, put the reverse thread nut on. That's how I found it. If you remember, this before was completely broken off, so I found it just dangling off. I don't have a reverse thread like that, I found out. So I went to the store. They've only had one of these, unfortunately, but it's the same thread. It should be fine. Okay, let's tighten that down. I don't really understand why this would have to be reverse thread. I don't want to tighten it too much because I still want to adjust it. But yeah, I guess we'll just work on adjusting the actual governor. This position is all the way open in throttle. That's where we want to keep it. This is idle. That's full throttle. From the looks of it. Yes. So, we want to turn this all the way counterclockwise until it bottoms out. So loosen is tighten. Okay, so that should be about it. I'm going to put some oil in it. I'm about 95% sure the carb is going to be nasty, but maybe we'll take the fuel line or take a fuel line and just kind of trim it or put it on the rail or something just so we can have a little bit of gas. And then if it's bad, we'll do the same thing. We'll clean the carb and go from there. But so far, I turn the engine over. Nothing's binding. That's good. I don't hear any scraping from when we took off the actual generator head and everything. So that's good. So I put everything back together with the exception of just the tank. And now we did the governor. From what I gathered, I did looked it up online. This is the standard where the spring is on the far hole because there's two holes there and also right here. So that's pretty normal. I'm not going to go into it too much unless it's a problem, but I don't really like the carb on this at all just because it tends to not work right, but we'll double check that before we start it. When I mean it doesn't work right, I mean this. I haven't tried it yet, but let's see if it does. So there's a screw missing, so I have to hold this plastic piece back on that will cover. But this is no choke. This is choke, so that's good. Sometimes going back from choke though, yeah, it's doing it. The arm is actually bending instead of moving. That could be because the carb is nasty, or it could just be a bad arm. I kind of feel like it's both, so I don't even think I'm going to bother trying it without the carb on. Or I think I'm just going to take the carb off and we'll start cleaning it. We'll take a look at it. I've done this in the past where I have attached, but now I can weld it. I can put a piece of metal on there to kind of stiffen this up, but if we don't need to, we don't want to. It could just be there's just a whole bunch of corrosion or maybe gas or something got in there, and it's causing it to kind of bind. So let's take off the carb. So I mentioned that there was a bolt missing. It's missing right there. I think I know the reason why. To take the carb off, let's put you in a little better position. You have to take off, or at least loosen this plate from the looks of it. Probably just take it off. And that is also connected to that plastic piece. So I can imagine that during the removal process last time, it probably just never came back on. But it's okay, this is a fairly common. Okay. And there was just a air filter cover over before, just two 10mm. It wasn't anything spectacular. So tipped it over a little bit, and well, you can see that it's a little nasty. A couple things I've noticed though. This is in no way the stock carb. I don't really see any markings on it. I mean, usually you'd see like you know, Walboro or something, but there's nothing. This is bent. I can't imagine that was on purpose. So maybe we'll bend that back. This is the problem, one child right here. So this is just very inadequate. It feels pretty solid though. Maybe it just wasn't put on right. That's pretty tough. But at the same time, you don't want it, you know, flapping back and forth. Otherwise, we'll just have like choke coming on and off all the time. Well, besides a bad gas, it doesn't look horrible at all. Practically new. I mean, it probably is new. I think there was some serious funkery going on with this engine. I ran across this a couple times. People tried to get more output out of it, so they mess with the engine speed. Yeah, that wasn't even clogged. Just a little wet. I think I'm just going to blow that off, put the bowl back on, clean it up because it's disgusting since all that gas came out of it. Put it back on and we'll see what happens. Let's see if we can't re-bend this back. Okay. It's at least straight. So, I'm gonna bend that back because that also looked a little funked up. Yes, I said funk. Get your mind out of the gutter. Okay, I'll go ahead and put this back on now. Hopefully you can see this, but this is what I was talking about, like the little lever likes to bend this piece. It's because the choke, like the indentations, are way too big. So I ground it down because the actual plate will stop it. Because if you look at this side, see how it's much more pronounced? It doesn't have a problem on that side. It's at a much better angle, so it's not going to be causing it to bend. But this other side, man. I was thinking about strengthening this, maybe putting something on here, but I decided not to. Just grind it down. It seems to be fine. That is usually only a problem on non-stock carbs, though. Here it is. So, put the fuel line on, put some, obviously, a tank on. I was going to just put like a normal fuel line, just kind of attach it to the top here, but I decided not to. It would be too much of a pain. The tank isn't that hard to put on and off. And I can still access the carb if I need to pretty easily, so I'm not going to worry too much about that. New oil, plug, I cleaned and tested and it was fine, so it should be okay. I wasn't quite sure on the routing of the fuel line. It seems either way too long or way too short. I think after this I'm going to look it up and explain the actual way, but it's not touching anything hot now, so that's good. Other than that, made sure everything is fine, attached it, put the extra bolt in the plastic, so that should be fine. Let's give it a yank and see what happens. And just in case that's off, could stand to have a longer cord. So I took the, I don't know, throttle plate off. I noticed that when you turn this in, this part is kind of bent. Because I put a kilowatt meter on there, and it said it was only doing about 42 hertz, I want to say, at the max. That tab looks pretty decent. Oof. Look at that tab. Give ourselves some room there. Actually, kind of looks like this bottom piece is just kind of all bent up. Maybe more like that. Yeah, maybe just a tad more. Now this seems a little bent. No, it's pretty secure on there. But now, why is it going at such a weird angle? Let's just take this off. I definitely think some major funkery took place on this generator. Can't even do that anymore. There we go. Okay. It could be a little better, but it's pretty decent now. Same thing maybe with this one. I think that's what happened. The person that was tightening this, he just over tightened it. One makes the other one bend. Okay, I'm gonna put this back on. It seems to be doing pretty good now. I raised it up, put the plate back on, put the spring back on. So let's go ahead and give it a pull. I have my adjustment tool. Just have to remember when you adjust one, you also have to adjust the other one. Let's see here. Let's think about this stuff. That way. Let's take a look. Choke on. It was very close. It was like a 57, but still hunting. It might be the filter. Let me see if I can find a filter for it. A day or two later, I ordered a new filter. That came pretty fast. And then I ordered a cover. I knew I had one. I knew it. Eventually, after some searching, I found the cover. So, that's the right cover. I don't have the right screws though, but I just put anything in to hold it in. I ordered the two of the true twist screws. I don't think this is going to resolve our problem, but I at least want to give it a try. And there is an adjustment that we could potentially do on the side, but we'll see what happens. Yeah, it's pretty rough. Kinda seems like it's a little lean. I think I might have a carburetor that came off the old pressure washer that I got that from. Let's see if it is the same, and then we'll clean it, put it on, and see what happens. So this is the old one. This is the new one. They look basically the same to me. I checked the jets. I took it out on this one. This one is just a little bit bigger. I took the little mini bit set, and I kind of tested it, and the one that would fit in this one was the one right after the one that would fit in that one before I would actually have to start removing material. So I'm going to try that. Something else I noticed though is this does have a idle jet. And I wanted to check to see the size of it. This is the second one in my packet. The first one, which barely fits on like a 6.5 horse, fit in here very snugly. I'm going to drill this one out a little bit more. I mean, technically the right thing to do is just to buy a Briggs & Stratton carb, but those are insanely expensive. And for what I'd get out of it, I'd be lucky if I break even. Generators in my area don't sell for all that much money. Mainly because our storms here are fairly minimal. They've learned to put power lines under the ground, and the ones that don't have power lines under the ground, they trim the trees very routinely. So, luckily power is not too much of a concern here. You probably will have it. But there are those occasions when, I don't know, maybe like a vendor that has like a truck or like a taco truck or a contractor, you know, stuff like that. They'll use these types of machines. I mean, I still have one because I live in a fairly, I don't want to say desolate, but a rural environment. So I'm going to blow this out, put it back in. I'm taking the big jet, putting the good carb, and then we'll put it back on and we'll test it. I've got to say, this whole plastic design throttle is just horrible. Like, this is the reason why people don't buy these engines. This right here. Do you ever have like one of those jobs when you have like a manager or some type of supervisory role that you have no idea what they do, and then all of a sudden they tell you to do useless stuff for no apparent reason, just to kind of make it seem like they're important, but you know they're really not? That person designed that. Getting very close. This screwdriver I think is too big for the actual adjustment screws. I'm going to turn it out, maybe another turn, and we'll try it again. If not, we'll drill the jet again. Or we'll drill this one in. We still have our original one. Fire in the hole. So this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to take out the jet, the idle jet, drill to the next size up. I looked at a GX220, and it's number 3 on my little mini drill bits. So I'm going to do a 3. Then I'm going to take the bowl off, because taking this carb off is a real pain. Take the jet out, and then drill it to the next size, and I think we're getting there. Oh man, he also designed the carb. The jet is not on this side like I thought it was, it's on the inside. So I can't even do that. So I have to take the whole carb off again. Yet again. Let's try this. I think we're on the cusp of it. I have one more adjustment I want to do. I think I'm going to do the jets one more time. I have one more bit I can do for the main. I over suspect the idle's going to be too much. The idle does affect your main performance, but not so much on this level. So I'm going to drill it out one more time, and then we'll fine tune it. I put a 1000-watt load on it, and it dropped like from 61.5 to that 60.9. So that's about 20%. I think it's a pretty good engine. Let me do that again. So we are hopefully at the final end of it. I already have everything tuned up for the RPM and everything's fine. It sits at about 61 hertz at idle. It's like 128 volts or so, so I'm not too concerned about that. But when I did put a little bit of a load on there, which we'll do again, it broke up very, very mildly. So what I did is put a different jet in there. This one is drilled out to a jet that's 1.05 millimeters. Okay, well, I think we have it. So like I said, the main jet drilled out to a drill that was 1.05 millimeters. The idle jet, it was, anyone who has this kit, It was a number 74. I have no idea what size that is. Yeah, and it seems to run fine. That was an 1800 watt load, and it did fine. Like I said, when I put the same load on it before, it went down from like 61 hertz to like 60.4, 60.2, or somewhere around there. So with it being roughly 40%, you know, that's pretty decent. I would assume at the full capacity we're probably talking like 59 hertz. That's pretty good. I wouldn't want to. That's well within the operating range of acceptance in my book. So, what was the problem here? Bad governor, bad jetting in the carb. Now, the carburetor on this was a clone carb. The carb itself for those, I find, are fairly decent. I mean, the structure of them are fine. I mean, yeah, they're not the greatest of quality. You could tell they're machined like in 2 minutes, but you know, the passages are clear, and for the most part, I did have one occasion where it wasn't, but for the most part, they're clear. The real hard part is the jetting. So if you're going to be doing something like this, I didn't have that luxury because I didn't have the old carb, but if you're going to be doing something like this, you probably could get away with taking the jets out of the OEM one, putting them in the aftermarket carb, and you'll probably be fine. This one runs pretty decent. I have zero issues with it now. It's going to make a good addition to someone's emergency area in their garage, so I'm happy with that. Briggs Vanguard is a pretty decent engine, but like I said, this plastic area as well as that stupid plate is just not good. But other than that, it was a good little engine, and it's a good little generator. I'm going to reroute the fuel line to be a little bit more of an appropriate area, and I think it goes actually underneath. I'll have to double check on that one though, but I don't want it to be touching the exhaust. It's not anywhere near the exhaust because it's by the heat deflector. There's like the little metal part that deflects the heat, and so it's not touching anywhere close, but you know, it'd be better to not have it anywhere near the exhaust. So let's say, for instance, the hose accidentally got ripped off and touching the exhaust and gas got on there. It's just not a good idea. It probably wouldn't do much of anything, but it's just not a good idea. Other than that, governor arm was pretty decent. I know I didn't show a lot of the removal of the head, and that was mainly because it was hard to do both. This table's not that big, as you can tell, so it's a little hard. But other than that, hope you like it. Definitely subscribe, put a thumbs up. I'll keep on posting, keep watching, and if you have any questions, comments, anything, put a comment below. Have a good night. You know what, I was packing in for the day, getting all this stuff. Granted, my garage isn't that big, and so I had to put some stuff outside to get a little working room in here, but completely forgot to go over the next step. Besides the fuel line, I do need to get some washers and the appropriate nuts to hold down the tank. I have 2, I don't have 4, so I'm going to just go to the hardware store and buy some generic, just get 4 of the same type and do all of that. We already have new oil. I put a new spark plug in. That was one of the things I was wondering if it was having bad spark, that's why it's sputtering. Obviously you found out it's the fuel. So all that's good to go. I cleaned it up a little bit too in between now and then. So with the exception of just these, it should, and the fuel line of course, it should be good to go. Other than that, the only other thing I could think of is maybe a adjustment for that, but it's really not all that bad. I'm still able to turn it on pretty decent. I might get a thicker line and just kind of redo it, but I've shown it's the exact same idea as doing like a Honda recoil. I have videos on that, so watch those. It's not too difficult. Okay, so now it's really the end. Have a good night, and I'll catch you on the next one.